You, in your book, which is Winning People Without Losing Yourself, you mention that saying yes is easy, but saying no requires hard work. I wanted to dig a little deeper onto that because a lot of times saying no to people who you really love is very difficult. It can lead to you losing them, and that's very hard and very difficult to do. Why do you think that it's so important to say no, even if it's at the risk of losing someone you love?
Because when you do say no and you actually end up losing that person was never in a relationship with you. They were in relationship with a version of you that always said yes. And that's just the truth. If you actually stand up for who you are and the other person rejects you for that, you were never in a relationship with the actual self.
Right.
You're just this made up fictional entity who was like, yes, yes, of course, I love you. Of course, I'll be there for you. Of course, this, of course, that, blah, blah, blah. And the minute you actually set up a boundary, which is, I'm sorry, I can't do this today, you were just completely fired. That was the wrong relation. There was never a relationship to begin with. So I often say this, that the best way to test a relationship, not that any one of you should, but the best way to test a relationship is to actually set a boundary. Because if you were to set a boundary and it's not respected, then that relationship didn't exist in the first place. It was a fictional one with a completely fictional character that wasn't you. And that's why I believe it's so important. Now, when you do that, there's a very fine layer between being hurtful when you set a boundary and being true to yourself when you set a boundary. Now, that distinction comes with experience, I'd argue, and I would admit, because it is possible that you do set a boundary that is just hurtful for the other person. Because what you want to do is not really set a boundary for yourself. You just want to test whether that person sticks around or not. So you're titillating them, you're provoking them, which isn't fair, which shouldn't be the way to do that. The boundary is only meant for you and your peace, and it never comes at the expense of somebody else in terms of hurt. It does come at the expense of them getting used to you having that boundary. And if that is not what they're comfortable with, then that relationship wasn't there in the beginning itself.
So, Ankur, as a formal people pleaser, I have one question.
I love it that you're formal. Congratulations on graduating.
So much. So, I have a question for you. As you said, following on what you just said, how do we set boundaries with ourselves? Because that is the initial point of everything, right? So, how do we set boundaries within ourselves, especially while having fleeting thoughts about everything, be it professional, be it personal? So, how do you do that personally?
And I'm glad that you asked the last part of it. How do I do it? Because I can only answer for myself. The simplest way that I've earned self-respect in my life is to keep the promises that I make to myself. It's the shortest way of doing that. Because if you really think about it, we often break promises with our own selves. We'll be like, I'll wake up at 6 tomorrow. And we don't. I will call my mom tomorrow. And we don't. I will go to the dentist tomorrow. And we don't. I will do this tomorrow. And we don't. So our brain just gets used to saying, you know what, this person just keeps lying. They don't really mean any of the things that they say, or most of the things that they say. So the next time they say something, don't believe it. Because most likely they're not going to follow through. So your conscious thoughts translate into a subconscious layer of not respecting your own thoughts. And that's why we are scared of our own thoughts. Like the biggest thing that I often hear from Gen Zs, and they don't say it because they don't even know what it is to experience it, is they are incapable. Incapable is the word of sitting by themselves for even 5 minutes. Without a book, without a phone, without music, without people, without anything triggering them or stimulating them, or they're just getting used to it. Nothing, just sit with your thoughts. They can't. And the reason they can't is because they're just scared of what comes up. Like, I'm just scared of the thoughts that will emerge and I don't want to face them. So it's just so easy for me to scroll Instagram instead. And I'm just saying the reason for that is because you have not given your own self irrefutable evidence that you mean business. That you, whatever you say, you will hold that to be true. It doesn't need to be the biggest thing. It doesn't need to be, I will scale Mount Everest this year. It will simply be, I will walk for 5 kilometers every day. And just do that. Just do that. Nothing else. People ask me, because we're in this environment, I want to write a book. How do I write a book? I was like, well, for a start, don't write a book. That's the best way to write a book. Because the minute you said, I want to write a book, there's just so much pressure that you will never start. Instead, just write every day. Just write every day. And believe me, in 1 to 2 years, a book will come out. But if you start with writing a book, you will never write a book because it's the most painful commitment to make. And that's true for so many other things as well.
People often say कि we should not seek validation. But let's say कि मैं clueless हूँ and मैं अभी भी अपनी life के साथ experiments कर रही हूँ. ठीक है, तो at this point validation seems almost necessary for me. So how do you make a difference between a healthy validation and not losing yourself?
So the way that I have thought about this is, you always need a center in life, and then you need a way to navigate around the center. So the best example that I can give is, imagine that there is a rod, उस rod से एक रस्सी है, and उस रस्सी के एक end पे एक गाय है. Now she is quote unquote stuck to the rod, but the rope is her allowance. And your job in life is to make this rope as long as possible, so that I can go as far out as possible from the center, but I always have the center. I'll never get lost. Now that center could be a job. For example, you are here right now at DeKoder, and you may say, you know what, this job, and I'm not suggesting that that's true, but this job is not my life, and I don't want to make it my life. But it's a job that pays the bills. It's a job where I get to work with smart people. It's a job where I get to learn my own self, grow, blah, blah, blah. But you know what? I am interested in singing, and I think I want to pursue singing. But singing is so random that you don't know whether you'll ever make it in life or not being a singer. So here's what I will do. My center rod is DeKoder, or my job. It is where I always come back to if I get lost. But my singing is my rope. So I will learn how to sing. I will join singing clubs. I will perform live. I will throw myself out into the universe. None of it will be to earn a living. It will simply be to become a good singer. And that's the only thing that matters, because the more and more you invest in becoming a good singer, the longer the rope becomes. And at some point of time, you may find yourself in Florence, part of a singing group, singing an opera, which you never dreamt of. You're not getting paid for that, by the way. It's not going to show up ever again. आपके Instagram पे सिर्फ आप ही और आपके 5 दोस्त ने like किया वगैरह वगैरह. But the confidence you've got is at a different level altogether. And at one point, you'll be like, you know what? I now want to go on Instagram and start to record my songs. Cover. I'm not writing my own songs. I'm not a writer. I'm a singer. तो मैं covers गाऊंगी. And now you're doing it. And you do it for 3 years. You still have the center. And the next thing you know, you've blown up because you're a good singer. Because for years, all that you've done is just devoted yourself to the art, not putting any pressure to make money from it. And you gave it that rope. You gave it that freedom, that allowance. So one day, your side gig will become bigger than your day gig. And at that point of time, throw the day gig out and become the side gig person. And that is how you don't lose yourself while giving yourself that allowance. So I often say this, even in the book, but even otherwise, please keep exploring. A lot of people misread that by, oh, I have to keep changing jobs every year. No, that's not a point being. Hold the center. It's really important for you to have a center in life. But with that center, please extend. Now then people ask me, what does it mean about relationships? So should I have one steady boyfriend and then keep exploring boyfriends? I said, no. Have a steady relationship that you know you can always rely on. The best one of that will be with your own self. So you don't frankly need anybody else. But because you don't need anybody else, you'll actually find meaningful connections all across the world because you have the healthiest relationship with your own self. But if you don't have the healthiest relationship with your own self, you will keep looking for everything that you're missing in life in everyone else. You don't love yourself, you'll keep looking for love from people else. You don't respect yourself, you'll keep looking for respect from others. You don't trust yourself, you'll keep looking for trust from others. Basically, what you don't have, you'll keep looking from others. The center is very important, whatever that center is.
So, a boundary that I was thinking about is an internal one. There's a word that goes around a lot, which is overthinking. And even you talk about overthinking. But it's such a subjective experience, right? Cognitive processes are so subjective. My overthinking could be different from yours. I was wondering if you have a way to tell the difference between overthinking and thinking, and do you think there can be like an objective understanding of such a subjective experience?
I can attempt. And the way that I've thought about this is the following. There is possibility and probability. These are two different words, but let's try and dig in what they mean. When you stepped out today to show up at the DeKoder office, there was a possibility, God forbid, that you will be hit by a bus and never make it. But you still stepped out. That's quite bold of you. And the reason is because while you know that the possibility of it is there, the probability of it is really low. Overthinking is when we assume that the possibility of something equals the probability of it. So you overthink when you think, oh my God, I can get fired from that job, which is a possibility. And you think that the probability of that happening is really high because in your head, you've just confused the two things. Overthinking is when you're like, oh my God, he or she is going to leave me, which is a possibility. And the probability of that is high. And that's why you are overthinking. So overthinking is when we confuse the possibility and the probability. Now, a rational mind, and it's very easy for me to say it, so I forgive me when I make this claim. The rational mind will be like, okay, I understand that the possibility of this exists, the possibility of me dying today, the possibility of me getting cheated upon today, the possibility of me getting dumped by my parents today, the possibility of me losing my job today, all of that exists. What's the probability of it? And you rationally decode that in the DeKoder world, decode that probability. You will arrive more often than not at a probability which is ridiculously low. And that is how your brain gets convinced, the way that it did this morning for you to step out, that I don't need to worry about this, even though there is a possibility of it. Now, as I said, it's very easy for me to say it, but when you're in that moment, it's really, really hard. So often, the best remedy to get out of overthinking is to ask this very simple question. Everything that I'm scared will actually happen. What is the probability of it happening? And be mathematical about it. In fact, ask ChatGPT about it. They will give you a more rational answer than maybe in that moment you can come up with. And that itself will be an input to your brain saying, okay, it's 1%. I don't need to worry about it because 99% I'll be okay.